Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and I'm an attorney that assists physicians with employment contract and independent contractor agreement issues. Today I'm going to talk about call requirements for a physician. So, what is required of the physician regarding after hours clinic call, or if you're in a specialty that requires, ED coverage, and then kind of the red flags that can be associated with that as far as the language that goes into the contract. So, call is a tricky one. Most employers do not want to put a set call schedule into an employment contract. They would rather, I guess, reserve the right to potentially change it down the road, and therefore they don't want to be locked into something that's listed in the contract. Many places will list it in an offer letter if you're going to get that, but they're not willing to put it into a contract. And as someone who's done this for over 20 years, it's very important to dial in this language. Now, this is specialty dependent. So if you're a pediatrician, if you're in family medicine, you're not, well, I guess, potentially could be doing some rounding if you're a pediatrician in a hospital. But for the most part, in those scenarios, it's just after hours call. And normally they would be triaged through if you had some NPs or PAs in the clinic. And then if it had to escalate to the level of the physician, they would take the call. It's normally split amongst the providers of the practice. So in that scenario, it's not that big of a deal. But let's just take an OB-GYN, for instance. Obviously, this specialty takes a lot of call. And so what you want to make certain is that you have some maximum amount of days that you would have to take call or coverage in an ED. Now, an OB-GYN obviously has some specific call requirements that other specialties don't, because they're just, it's kind of randomized as far as when they have to deliver and that types of thing. But let's just take a cardiologist, for example, and they're with a group. The group is contracted out to the hospital to provide coverage in their emergency department. The language in the contract in that scenario would be very important. So maybe there's 5 physicians in the practice, and there's always going to be disparate levels of, age and then time with the practice. For the most part, you want to make certain that you have some kind of language that says call will be shared equally amongst the providers. There are scenarios where kind of the new physician gets shafted and they either have to take more call or they get all of the terrible, the holidays or the weekends or something like that. So you want language that says you will take a maximum of X amount of days per month, and then you will also, that call will then be split equitably amongst all the providers, in the group. So those two things are very important. I have had clients in the past who, at first, it's great, and then perhaps, somebody retires or someone moves on, and maybe they had 7 physicians at first, and then it dwindles down to 4, and so instead of taking 1 in 7 call, you're taking 1 in 4, and that's a vastly different experience for a physician in a circumstance like that. Now, how does a practice generally handle that if they do lose? Well, for the most part, it's common courtesy to understand that some coverage may be necessary. Let's say if someone left and they're trying to fill their role. But if somebody retires, there's almost always heads up, and you just want to be careful that you're not getting the short end of the stick. Burnout, at least in my opinion, call requirements, having to take too much call, having to get up, in the middle of the night when you're not expecting it too many times, is probably the leading cause for people who are just completely burned out of being a physician or working in their specific specialty. And so this is definitely something that should be in the contract. Now, also, compensation for call is important as well. Not every position is going to be compensated for call. Essentially, they're going to bake in whatever call that you're supposed to take, into your base salary. And so in a scenario like that, you're not always going to be paid for call, but in many specialties you are. And so how that would work is, let's say you're employed by a hospital or healthcare network. In those circumstances, you're part of a med staff, you're just simply expected to take a certain amount of ED call. Very likely unpaid. Now, if you work for a group or like a smaller physician-owned group in the area, that's then contracted out to a hospital to provide coverage for their ED, they're going to get paid for that. And so many times, I guess the scenario would be there's, several partners, they're getting paid for the call, and then that's not getting passed through to the associate. Depending upon whether you can potentially become a partner, sometimes that's kind of a carrot on the end of the stick that they use. But if there's no potential for partnership, and your bosses are getting paid for call and you're having to take it and not get paid at all, well, that's something that you can negotiate in advance, and I would advise you to do so. So being specific with how much call you have to take, the maximum amount of call you have to take per month, and then whether it's split equitably amongst the providers, and then whether you're going to get paid for it. Now, these are all things that they're going to say to you, oh, we're just going to verbally tell you, or maybe we'll send an email that says this is how it is right now. But I would suggest getting that locked down into the contract can be very important, especially if you're in a specialty where it could really affect your lifestyle. Well, hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions about your employment contract or independent contractor agreement, feel free to contact my law firm. All of our contact info is listed below in the description, and I appreciate you watching the video. Thanks.